Welcome to One Big Question on the Modern Software Engineering channel. I'm Trisha G. I'm going to be chatting with Daniel Terhorst-North about code reviews. Thank goodness I said your name right.
I get it wrong.
Yeah, the question I wanted to answer is, are code reviews necessary?
With anything like this, I because kind of a binary kind of are they necessary? Yes, no, right, we're done.
Exactly. I like to start that way.
Let's start with, well, we probably should start with definitions, but that could go on for hours. Let's start with purpose. What purpose does a code review serve? And the context for this, and I'm not asking this rhetorically, I'm asking you, Trisha, what you think, because I know you've done a ton of this. I know you've nerded out on code reviews in the past as an entire area of study. So I really want to pick your brains on that. But in particular, we've both grown up the sort of the XP flavor of agile route, the taking engineering seriously bit. One thing I've heard, I want to say trope, but one thing I've heard many times is if you're pairing, you don't need a code review. Mm-hmm. So I would love your take on, so what's the purpose of a code review? What does it give me? And or then what does pairing give me? And what is that, a Venn diagram? Is it a circle? How does it work?
That's a good question. I've not heard it phrased that way before. I definitely, when I worked with Dave Farley and when I worked in XP type teams, we did not do code review because we paired. And so we were firmly in the camp of you don't need code reviews if you're pairing. However, you're probably right in that they're not necessarily the same thing, because when you're pairing, you're often looking for what's the best design approach to do this? What are the sort of trade-offs we're going to make as we're implementing it? We might switch between, writing the tests and writing the production code, and you kind of get two slightly different mindsets as you evolve the code. And you're doing it quite iteratively, and it's preferably with small commits, possibly like committing to the main branch, that kind of thing. So there's a number of different things working together if you're going to work in that way. So like when we've paired, we also committed to main, to trunk or whatever. So that whole process of working is quite different to the process that other organizations are using, where you have feature branches, pull requests, and code reviews. And so you sort of have like, it's not just do you have code reviews and pairing or do you not? It's like, it's the whole sort of software process of creating stuff. And it's also about trust. So like code reviews, I first saw code reviews when I was working at an investment bank. And the code reviews were exactly what you expect them to be. You've got some senior architect going, are there any bugs in this code? Like the code, you sort of argue.
Yes, I love to write code with bugs, and it's my favorite kind of code.
It's my favorite thing to do. But it's very much like, it's literally gatekeeping. It's literally like, is your code allowed to pass through to be committed, to be merged, or to be put into production, whatever you want to do? And in those sorts of code reviews, the mindset is usually like, the default is no, your code is not ready. And that's a very different mindset to when you're pairing, or when you're working in a high trust XP team where you trust each other and you're pairing and you're committing to main. There is no. There's just like, how is the best way to do this, right? So it's not just about code reviews versus pairing. It's almost like two completely different cultures when you're working in different types of teams.
Okay.
I don't think that answers your question, but
No, I think it did, because what I'm trying to get under the skin of is what you, or one, I guess, but your opinion of what the code review does. And what I'm hearing is, so as you say, when you're working with someone like Dave Farley, or one of those sort of, what I think of as very high performing, co-located, high bar type teams with good habits, right?
Yeah.
Then and you're pairing. Which for me, the single biggest value of pairing, I mean, there's many, many benefits. For me, the single biggest value of pairing for me is squirrel, right? Is if I'm pairing with someone, we're generally doing the thing.
Yes.
Whereas if I'm working on my own, I'm generally doing the thing about 10 to 15% of the time.
Right.
And the rest of the time, not doing the thing.
So I have the same thing, but differently. So I do the thing in 15 different ways. Because I'm like, oh, no, there's a better way to do it. And then I do it in a different way. And I go, oh, no, but I prefer the other way. Or, oh, there's a third way. And so for the same reason, when you're pairing, it kind of helps you stay more focused, but also helps you answer a lot of these questions of, oh, what if we did it this way? And you can think through the sort of the it depends things, and it keeps you a bit more sane, I think.
Well, and that's why I think the whole driver navigator metaphor is just utterly nonsense. Like, for me, it's two people solving a problem.
Mm.
right? And it's two people are solving a puzzle, and one of them happens to be typing right now.
Yes.
But that's not a driver navigator. It's still two people in real time discussing. And the way I describe it is like, say I'm pairing with you. I've written loads of software, right? And I know that that is how you solve this.
Yeah.
And you've written loads of software, and you know that that is how you solve this, right?
Yeah.
And we start here, and we sort of go my way a little bit, and then we go your way, and we end up somewhere here, and we both go, whoa.
Yes. Yeah.
That is so much better. I say this time and again, all the best code I've ever written, I didn't write.
Yeah.
All the best code, the code I'm most proud of in my career was absolutely not from me. It was from me plus.
Collaborating, yes.
But it's back to code reviews then. I think, so there's two things going on, two of the many things going on when you're pairing. One is a continual, obviously you're looking at the problem, you're looking at the solution space, and you're probably thinking about things like domain language and whatever else, and testability and all of those things that we care about. By and large, on a smaller, high-performing team, you're likely to have shared values. So you're going to be saying, oh, this method's getting a bit big, or, I'm not really sure what this does anymore. The name is no longer intention revealing, those kind of things. There's a continual kind of review in the small, if you like. And I think to the gatekeeping thing, because generally people use gatekeeping as a pejorative. Oh, that's gatekeeping.
Right.
There's a reason you have gates, right? That you want things of a certain quality bar to be allowed through the gates. Now, gatekeeping in the usual pejorative sense is pointless posturing for like some kind of power imbalance thing. And let's park that definition for a minute. Gatekeeping where it's genuinely, we have a quality bar here. The question then is, how much of that quality bar is, statically analyzable? Can I get, little computers doing it, whether they are linters or static analysis or other, AI little robots these days who might go and have an opinion? And how much of it do I genuinely want human beings involved?
Yeah.
And I think that's a legitimate discussion, and in the age of reasonably functional Gen AI, I want to revisit. But I think the one thing I wanted to pick up, and when I teach my Great Software Habits classes, I talk about a code critique, and I deliberately wanted a different term because I've seen code reviews used for a different purpose. And this is what I mean about what's it for? What's the goal of it? So, real example, very small, very high performing team, building a trading system because all my stores are trading systems. And this was by this point there were 6 people in the team, roughly working as 3 pairs in what I call shallow silos. So the team was very much a team, and we'd have stand-ups, a couple of times a day. And then we'd go back into our shallow silos. We weren't deep silos, we could step out of them and be a team. But there was, by and large, you had trading, like all of the domain logic of like gnarly race conditions and trade domain knowledge and all of that, the trading bit. You had the UI bit. So everything that a trader interacts with, this is an algorithmic trading system. They've got to be able to see sliders and real-time data and stuff. And everything about making that both correct and very, very usable. And then glue, right? Integrating things, and connecting to an exchange, taking a fire hose of exchange data, connecting across the organization to things like risk systems, trade post-processing, all of that stuff. And that's my happy place. I don't care about the domain. I'll do glue in retail, I'll do glue in telecoms, I'll do glue in trading, I don't care. And we have these 3 pairs doing this stuff. And the team lead, sort of one of us was nominally the team lead. It was very much a peer team, but the nominal team lead, he noticed, he used to have a thing going where he had he was using Emacs, and he'd have a thing that would just alert every time a Git commit happened. Every time a Git push happened or whatever. And it would just pop up the commit, the first line of the commit message. And it wasn't a policing thing. It was more like he wanted a background thing of sort of what sort of work is going on. And he noticed, for some weird coincidence, all 3 pairs happened to be solving a similar kind of thing at around the same time. And it was either something like, how do you model a trade, or matching, or something had happened, right? And it just happened that we'd all been working on those at around the same time, and we'd all done perfectly cromulent solutions a bit differently. And so he said, okay, as a team, we should probably look at all 3 of these, right? It may be that they're in different, bounded contexts, subdomains, getting all domain driven for a minute, and it's completely fine for them to be modeled differently. It may be that they're different because Trish and Daniel happen to come up with different things than, Ken and whatever.
Ken and Barbie
over there, and they just have a different mental model or different history. So which of this is necessary diversity, and which of this is arbitrary, and we should probably come up with an opinion. And we did this, and it was a team-based review of 3 basically implementations of the same idea in 3 really interestingly different ways. And the upshot of it was we all liked all of them. We could all see the merit of all of them. We all agreed that they probably were arbitrarily different, and it didn't really matter. And we had a bit of a chat and came up with effectively an integrated version of the thing, which took like most of Trisha's thing, but also a bit of Ken and Barbie's thing over there and a bit of these people over here. And that was what we did. And having made that decision, we captured it as an architecture decision record, ADR, because we did that. And then as part of the ADR kind of body, if you like, was, okay, and now how are we going to bring all this stuff under, back into whatever alignment. And so there was a bit of work where we went off and changed all 3 of the code base or parts of the code base, so they all now look the same. And I think so for me, there's so a couple of important things. One is this happened out of band of working.
Mm-hmm.
Right, none of this was a gatekeeping or a policing exercise. Right, all of us could just ship code, get stuff done. This was more of a, hey, have you noticed? We all seemed a bit, and it was just that the same language was coming up in the commit messages was the only clue.
That's good. That means you were doing descriptive commit messages.
Right, exactly. We're doing commit messages that when you look back. So I came across this years ago, and I wish I could find the person to credit. And she said, I remember it was a she. She said, your commit message should end the sentence, applying this change will.
Right.
Applying this change will add new validation types. Right. Applying this will solve the race condition.
Right.
And it's lovely. It's lovely. It starts lowercase. It's an active verb phrase that finishes the sentence.
Yeah.
And so we all got into that mindset. And so you could just see this basically narrative of what was going on in the code base. But it never said, we'll update the README or change these files. It never said what you did. It said what we can now do.
What it's for.
The new capability. And I gave it a different name. This is not policing. This is not review in that sense. This is the team coming together to critique a thing. So this is 15 years ago or something. And I love that model of like just monitoring sort of what's going on and having that type of review. And for me, that feels very orthogonal to pairing.
So this is really good because I have a theory, which I've vaguely written about, but I haven't really fully formulated. I've identified 3 main reasons to do code reviews. There may be more, but these are the 3 that I've seen. First is gateway code reviews, where the idea is just to sanity check the code and make sure it's safe before it goes to the next level of whatever it is, right? Which is the common use case for pull requests and code reviews in financial markets and stuff like that. So gateway code reviews. The second is code reviews for knowledge sharing. So not that I've seen a bunch of people who will review code after it's been merged because it's not about necessarily checking that it's correct. It's about sharing the changes amongst the whole team, right? So everyone gets a view on what the changes are. It's not necessarily stamping that those changes are correct or not. You can, of course, make changes and be like, oh, what you need an extra test here, or, okay, what if we did this? But often that's always moving forward. So instead of like rejecting the code review and making them make the changes and merge it, what you do is you add another commit to make the additional changes, right? Or it's moved forward. So that's the second one, code review for knowledge sharing. And the third,
and then the commit message there would be something like, in response to this really useful feedback.
Yeah,
we've done this other thing. Yeah,
exactly. And then the third type, I've been trying to pin down for a little while. What I was trying to think of is, what if you did code reviews a little bit like pairing? What if you did it not after the commit and not after the merge and not just before the merge, but as you're doing commits? So the idea, like pairing, is that you're going to evolve the design together, you're going to evolve the ideas together. So you do reviews where you're sharing the code amongst other people, but you're doing it iteratively. There's no right or wrong answer. There's more like, okay, how can we pull this forward? And what you just described sounds a bit like that, but it's like a review amongst the whole team on how we can evolve the design of the application forward in a sensible way, given that we've got these 3 different implementations. But I've seen almost no one use that pattern for code reviews. Maybe it's called something else, but I haven't seen anyone. I've only seen pairing or review. I haven't seen, okay, how can we collaborate together as we're building a thing, until we started working with AI agents and AI code. Because then you're collaborating together on individual commits, on individual stuff, right? You tell Claude to go away and do a thing, and it comes back and you go, and it's not the full commit. It's not the thing you want to merge. It's a small thing. And you go back and go, oh, okay, what if we did it this way? What if we did that? What are the trade-offs? And so with AI coding assistants and agents and stuff, we're having to learn different skills on how we read and review code in a collaborative way, which is more like pairing or more like the sort of review that you were describing. But people have not been doing that. And I feel like this is either a new skill or an evolution of a skill that we didn't practice very much to begin with.
That's interesting. I want to unpick that a bit. Before I came back to your three types, because I'm a fan of that, and I've been being quite vocal about this on the internet, is when one is working with an agent, an AI, or so an LLM of any sort. It doesn't matter if it's agentic or just you doing back and forth. I'm really opinionated about distinguishing between pairing, which is two human beings with entirely different, whatever backstories working together to solve a thing, and having a rubber duck, even if it's a very, very sophisticated rubber duck.
Right.
Right. So this thing doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't have knowledge in the way that a person has knowledge, or experience in the way that a person has experience. It has access, legally or otherwise, to a vast amount of prior art. And that makes it a wonderful rubber ducking. I'm actually building a teaching stack at the moment. So I'm reading all my online training, all my training, so I can do it online. And I've never had slides before. I've always had slides in my head, but I draw it all on an iPad and the slide kind of evolves. And now what I want is actual slides where I can, so in the same way I would give a talk at a conference, I can use the same structures to give a talk in a class, but so there's much, much more kind of interaction and exercises and stuff, weave all that in. Anyway, using Claude to get that done. Other LLMs are available.
Yes.
Claude Code is fantastic for this. And one of the things that happened in the last day, so this is hot off the press, I've got a buddy in the US who is keen to use this thing. So I did a show and tell with her, and she's a VP of engineering somewhere. She's doing a big offsite for her team. And she's like, oh, that would be a really useful structure for me to have all of my content, and the structure for my basically offsite is kind of like you do in a class, right? And I've built this heads-up display, or rather I've spec'd out this heads-up display that Claude is iteratively built. And it's all pretty slick. And so yesterday I was like, okay, I want to hand this over to you so you can have a play with it. I need to put the docs together. And I coined this back with a chap called Chris Reed 100 years ago I was working with. And he's one of the original kind of DevOps gang, but where I kind of came into DevOps from the dev side, he came into DevOps from the ops side, and he's just a wonderful human being. But I was handing over a thing that I'd built as I was leaving. And it was a Heroku knockoff, right? So it was an internal. You had a bunch of folks who I call them technical non-programmers, so network engineers, data center, procurement, DBAs. So folks who are around technology but don't code. And they were just getting into like writing little utilities in Python, or putting a little web app together or something like that, that would run on their laptop. And now we had the problem of how do I get that to run somewhere that other people can use? So that was what this little stack did. And I started putting together the handover README to Chris, and it ran to about 3 or 4 pages, and I was embarrassed, Trish. I can't give him this. So I spent the next 2 or 3 days cleaning it up and cleaning it up and cleaning it up. And so basically the README just went, install this Python package, set these 2 variables. One's a host name, one's a port. That's it, right? There is no step 3.
Yeah.
And I call this embarrassment-driven refactoring. You start with a thing, and then you iterate on it until you're no longer embarrassed to hand it over to someone. So anyway, I'm about to hand this thing over to my buddy, and
it happens in open source, right? Because when you're like, I'm going to open source this thing, you're like, oh no, I can't open source it like this.
I can't. People are going to see this. Oh my goodness. So anyway, and what it led to this time, apart from a load of simplification, is I completely reworked the domain model of my training. So you've got, I have topics, and the topics might be, there's content topics, and there's bookend topics, like an opener or a closer. And then there's a schedule, and the schedule for the day has sessions in it, and the sessions have topics, and it's sort of like a slight hierarchy there. But that whole domain model, I'd had a totally different thing 2 days ago.
Right.
And so I basically spent, I don't know, an hour and a half or something yesterday just rubber ducking with Claude and getting to, right, that's much tighter, much slicker. I can now, if it's in my head, it will fit in someone else's head.
Yeah.
And literally just, leading up to this recording is I'm now building out the new version of this thing, and it's much tighter. So I think the, LLM, Gen AI as rubber duck, and as quite sophisticated rubber duck, is a brilliant tool. And I think you're right. I think people generally have never asked. I think the doll's name was Matilda, something like HP or somewhere. They had a development team, and any of the engineers could ask any of the other engineers anything, right? If you were stuck. But the one rule was you had to ask Matilda first.
Okay.
And Matilda was a rag doll.
Right.
that lived on a table somewhere. And you go and ask Matilda, and you say, hey, Matilda, I need to get the data out of this system. Oh, never mind. Right? Because, of course, externalizing it is how you rubber duck, right? And that skill, the skill of rubber ducking, I think you're absolutely right. We've never been good at it. And it turns out that to get something like agentic AI or any Gen AI to perform requires you to be half decent at rubber ducking.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I really, really keen to go back to your three types of three reasons, if you like, because I sort of have names for them, because I think I have a very similar model. So the gateway review, I call that policy. And policy is policy. Yes, it's the same route as policing. The point of it, though, is about we've already decided how we do things around here.
Yes.
And we decided those for a reason. And, it's not edict from on high.
We wrote it down somewhere. We could show it to the regulators and we say, this is how we do stuff.
Well, and this is it. So some policy is defined externally. That's your regulatory stuff. Some policy is local idioms. This is how we use this technology. This is how we deploy to Kubernetes. This is the tiny subset of Scala that we use so our brains don't explode. Whatever it is. But policy is the rules, if you like, the rules of the road. The next one, the knowledge sharing, I think of as show and tell.
Yeah.
The show and tell is we did this cool thing, right? And one of my kind of techniques, if you like, or habits as a consultant when I'm in an organization, I call it harvest and amplify. So my goal isn't to go in there and tell people what to do. Is to go in there and say, right, I've just noticed Trisha's doing this really cool thing on her project. But as long as it's a really cool thing that Trisha did, it's a point solution that will happen once.
Yeah.
Right. So harvest is how do I generalize that? Maybe tighten it up, turn it into a library, document it, put some tests around it. Stuff that Trish would do if she had more time, but she's busy, right? She's on to the next thing. So that's the harvest bit. And amplify is then broadcast it, right? This is how we should be doing testing race conditions. This is how we should be doing managing our cloud budget. Right, whatever, she's done this thing for this 1 point solution here. We could turn this into and that becomes policy.
Yeah.
So policy is we spotted some sensible ways of doing things and we want everyone doing them. Show and tell is here's some cool stuff and then you can see how they interact. So show and tell can become how we start to implement policy. Let's do this harvest amplify, see how it lands. If it does land, if the amplify bit works, guess what? New policy.
Yeah, exactly. The point about the knowledge sharing stuff is so people know what patterns are being used or what techniques people are using, so that you can use them again and not reinvent the wheel. And then, of course, you're right. The more people are doing that, the more it becomes policy or design decisions or, the way, whatever that looks like.
And sometimes we have informal policy, and part of being that, that sort of the seniors, the staff engineers or whatever, is making the implicit explicit.
Yeah.
I've noticed that around here we do blah when we deploy things. Let's just make that a thing. And as much as we can automate that policy, that gatekeeping, then it's done. Right. And as much as we can't, let's make it so anyone could learn how to, when you're driving in the UK, we drive on the left. When you're driving in Spain, you drive on the right. No one cares. But if everyone does it, no one dies. Right. Yes. Or fewer people die. Right. But also, so that's policy in terms of literally rules of the road. But also there's things like if someone's trying to turn right from a side turning, if you just pause and let them out, it's just nice. There's like etiquette policy.
Right.
And I think what we're not particularly good systemically at the etiquette parts of policy. We'll do like the minimum viable rule following, but what is it? What can I do that means that Ken and Barbie pairing over there are going to go, oh man, I'm so glad you did that thing. Yeah, that really helped me out.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think different people have different etiquette as well. So people don't always acknowledge or value other people's etiquette because it's not theirs.
Oh, there was a dreadful thing that happened some years ago where they had a manager read me or whatever. And the manager read me is, I'm a new manager of a team and I'm going to write a read me file. It's like, that's the most passive aggressive way of introducing yourself. Here are my rules. If you don't like them, I can get other employees, right? But something like, for me, it is much more like empathy. Let me understand how Trisha works. She won't even know, right?
Yeah.
But I've noticed that she's much more on fire in the morning.
Right.
Right? she just has slow afternoons. I don't know if she even knows that, but if I want to ask her a gnarly question, it'll wait until tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the third one then, which is the thing you're saying happens in line, this is what I call critique.
Okay.
And I'm seeing that as for alignment, for, so it's not gateway policy stuff.
No. It's about feedback and it's about iterating.
Yeah. It's almost like a discovery piece to learn new policy.
Yeah.
How are we doing durable data, right? How are we storing? Is it all just going into Oracle like it always has?
Right.
Or are we, do you know what I've noticed? That sticking data into a bunch of just zillions of JSON files in a directory is much more amenable to, I don't know, sucking it into an LLM.
Yeah.
You know, the file is the new database, right? If everything's marked down, you know, and so that suddenly becomes, hey, let's do a critique of that, right? What are the security risks for that? What are the availability risks for that? Let's talk about that as a team and then decide what would be the use cases in which that's the right thing to do.
So that's an interesting point, because that implies that critique, for example, is used under specific circumstances and not for every single bug that you're working on.
And that's why it's not in line. It's not in line, like it's not part of the path to live.
Yeah. But you're going to do it for things like maybe big new features or new design approaches, or if you're doing some greenfield stuff, that like new stuff, you're definitely going to need to be aligned on the patterns and designs that you're using, for example, or the approaches. And also I would have thought like risky things like this has a certain security profile, or this is, I don't know, using new technologies or something. That's probably where you want to do more of the critique side. Whereas if you're just fixing a bug of something that gets displayed wrong on the screen, like you don't need the whole team to wade in on the best design for doing that.
And then you start to, and what I've noticed as well is that you get a sort of chunking effect. So most obvious in like UI design, where you would have a design system. So, you know, iteration one, I'm going to lay out everything on the screen. By the time we've done a bunch of these, this is our library of, if you have a multiple choice, right, that we have multiple checkboxes rather than a control click list, right? Or, you know, we prefer radios over drop downs, and it's not just like the style guide, it's and if you use this library of components, they're already tested, they already have validation, they already have PII, blah, 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 blah. You know, we've got all the stuff in there.
And the users know what to expect. It makes it better usability experience.
And we create, a more consistent design metaphor.
Yeah.
And then that, you know, you can imagine that as a principle out across how do we do deployment? How do we do path to live? How do we do observability? How do we do different types of testing? You know, and they become just like your run books of those things.
So that implies to me that there's times when we care about code reviews, as we've been calling them, and then maybe times when we don't necessarily care about reviewing code, because there's, you know, for example, if you get to the point where you're just talking about where, you know, you have a design language, you have a set of widgets, you have a known set of things that you do, a known set of practices and designs, like you don't need to review every single change that goes into those things because you already have
or if you do, you're doing something else wrong.
Right, exactly. And so I think that I feel like the industry has got somewhat dogmatic over pull requests, feature branches, code reviews. And now that we're using AI to write 10 times more code, and this is the point I really wanted to come to, if we're creating 10 times more code because we're using agentic AI or AI assistants or whatever we're using, I've spoken to a lot of people who are struggling under the load of reviewing all the code that the AI assistants have been doing. And my question for them, and I've asked some very senior folks who really know what they're talking about, I've asked them the question, why are you doing code reviews? Why are you reviewing the code? What are you looking for when you're reviewing?
Right. What need does it meet? What purpose is it serve?
What purpose is it? Like you started this whole conversation with, what is the purpose? And almost no one can tell me why they're doing it. That it's cargo cultism, it's monkeys in a cage. This is what we do. This is how we safely ensure that we don't do something stupid in production. It's like, but you're talking about automation. These days, it's very easy to automate the formatting and the linting. We've got automated tests, we've got performance tests, we've probably got and the AI is quite good at following the design patterns that we've chosen and using the design language that we've defined it to use. So then, you know, when you're looking at the code, like what are you looking for? Because humans are really bad at spotting bugs in code. Like that's
so let me speak very specifically to that. I'm putting together a talk right now. In fact, it's my first AI talk. I haven't done any AI talks. And my AI talk, you'll be unsurprised to hear, is called "Am I Holding This Wrong?"
Right.
I'm not doing any of those things with AI.
Right.
I'm writing. I mean, if I think of the amount of output I've had, and again, this is me building tools for myself, but these are tools, they're real products. They actually do stuff. What I'm finding is I'm writing what I think of as adjacent technology. So I'm doing stuff in Node.js, I'm doing stuff in HTML, CSS, whatever. I know that all of those isn't up to snuff, right? I know that it's good enough that I can see good, and you saying about like we're not very good at reviewing code. We're very, very good, I think, at scanning code and saying that doesn't look right.
Yes.
Like I'll know it when I see it type thing.
Yeah.
And I can scan quite a lot of Claude generated code and say, why is that named like that?
Right.
Or there seems to be an awful lot of top level global variables here.
Yeah.
Do they group into domain objects?
I was using Claude to generate some PHP for WordPress, technologies I'm not familiar with, but I can still look at that and go, that seems like a lot of CSS. Is there duplication? And this method seems long. Is there something that we can do?
Is that necessary? Is this, or am I on something? And I go, oh, well spotted, Trish.
Yes.
Good challenge. So that's the first part. And the second part is, so I think I can kind of recognize janky stuff in whatever technology. Yeah. But the other part is I'm using it not to generate lots of code. I'm using it to generate, and the phrase I'm riffing on at the moment, though that'll be different by the time I get to talk, is something like technology adjacent.
Okay.
Code. So things where, and Ward Cunningham came up with this, and it was a throwaway line of his years and years ago. I got to interview him at a conference, a QCon or something, and we had like an AMA of Ward, and I got to be the guy in the chair asking questions. It was brilliant.
Nice.
One of my absolute heroes. And he said, I think it was like a throwaway thing he said eventually he finds there's two types of things that he struggles with, that he finds his brain wrestling with. And one of those things, you come out of it going, I'm really glad I wrestled with that thing. I feel like I've really learned something there. I'm going to wrestle with Y Combinator.
Right.
I'm going to wrestle with SICP. I'm going to start with just, cons, and I'm going to get all the way to like understand that for that one brief moment in my life, I will understand Y Combinator and it will go away and I'll never know again. And that was a really fun intellectual kind of, he says, and the other kind is, I can't bloody print.
Yes.
And I'm sure he didn't swear because he doesn't, but like, I can't print, right?
Yeah.
And there will be a whole load of yags that get shaved in order to finally end up printing. And it will be a technical solution, and it will end up being some shenanigans, and you will never, ever need that knowledge again.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm using Claude for that. I'm like, I could go and learn the bits of modern JavaScript. And modern is probably the last several years because I haven't been hands-on for a little while with it. Ditto, I know that there is modern ECMAScript. I know that there are some great affordances and an awful lot of legacy libraries you don't need now. I love that Node test is a thing. I love that it has my describe it. I came up with describe it. I'm so pleased with that. It's kind of landed. And I suddenly see describe it in Node test. I'm like, oh, sweet. I didn't even know that existed. And so then I'm teaching it to say it as part of a sentence. Anyway, but then for those bits, it's now writing me a perfectly cromulent Node web app. I could learn to do that and I would never care.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm getting it to write about the same amount of code I would, not tens of thousands of lines of code, but it's writing code that another version of me would write if I could be bothered to learn those technologies.
That's like my update to the website. I've been meaning to reskin it for ages, but I couldn't be bothered to learn the PHP to do that. Right. And I got Claude to do it.
But you can describe the PHP. You know exactly what you want, right?
Exactly.
You'll know it when you see it.
I knew what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted. I've been thinking about it for 6 years,
Right.
But do you think, I'm going slightly off topic, but I'm trying to bring it back to code reviews. I'm not sure if we're the classic users of AI.
No, we're not. And this is why I'm holding it wrong, right?
Yeah.
I'm holding it through the lens of a 30+ year software veteran.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm seeing it as enormously valuable at a particular type of problem.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a general software developer. And it's, as soon as you decide that it is, then the cognitive drift between that metaphor and reality is going to just present in everything you get it to do.
And here's the other thing, because I'm sure we've all talked about this before, like the writing of the code was never the problem in the first place.
Yeah, see, I keep hearing this phrase. I disagree.
Really? Well, that sounds like another video, but
I think the writing of the code is it's the bit that we realized early on was so important that we had to so thoroughly internalize that we no longer think about it.
All right. I'm going to go and think about that.
I guarantee you, I can show you I can look at code. You can blind give me code from people at various points in their career, and I reckon I will be able to get down to a 6-month window of how long they've been programming when I look at that code.
Yeah, okay, I'll buy that. But anyway, what I was going to say, that like the thing about using AI to create more lines of code, I think what it does is it shows us where the rest of the system creaks. So the CI/CD pipelines running slower, tests running slower, and this comes back to the code review. The fact that the code review becomes a huge bottleneck because we require humans to read all this code.
Yes. Well, do we? No. Do we have a rule that says humans have to read all this code?
Exactly.
And again, comes back to the in order to what, right?
Exactly. And that's
in order to check a box that said this code was reviewed. Sarbanes-Oxley never meant that.
That's what I wanted to think about when I was thinking about, are code reviews necessary? Because more often than not, most teams don't know why they're doing them. They don't know how to do them well.
It's to tick a regulatory box.
And so now you're reviewing every single line of code, whether it's human written or AI written. And so I think it's really important for us to step back as organizations and go, what are we doing here? If our code reviews, if we can generate more code, or even if we're still writing it as humans, but it's taking longer to get through the code review process than to create the feature in the first place, what are we doing?
What are we doing wrong?
Yeah.
What are we doing wrong? And on that cliffhanger, I feel like we've probably gone a little over time here.
Oh, well.
How do we bring this to a close? Where did we get to?
Well, the original question was, are code reviews necessary? And of course, the answer is, it depends.
Well, yes and no. I think you're underselling yourself here, Trish. I love what code reviews for is there's these three things. There's policy, right? There's making sure that we're all doing the things that we all agree we should be doing, right? The gateway review, gatekeeping in the positive sense, right? The show and tell, we did this cool thing, you might like this cool thing. And then the critique of, we did this cool thing and actually we think this thing might be really significant and it might end up being policy, and we want to get a load of eyes on this to see if other people are doing things a different way. One thing I did want to touch on just before we wrap up is, and I've done this many times and I can only encourage people to do this, is to invert the power structure when you are doing a code review. Get juniors to review seniors' code is one of the most powerful learning kubricks or whatever, learning tools that I've come across. People who don't know the domain, people who don't know the language, people who are new to the organization, ask really good questions.
I always say this in my code review talk. I say, especially if you're doing knowledge sharing code reviews, but always get juniors to review your code. Because if they don't understand your code, it is not readable code.
I can't say that, well, I can. Many times I will get a question like, well, but why is that there then? And I'll just go, yeah.
I don't know. I'll just put it there.
Yeah, that should not be there.
Agreed. All right. Well, let's wrap this up then. So code reviews, in order to figure out whether you should, like, what's the point, you do have to think, what is the point? Like, what is the why? What is the purpose? And then I think it'll be easier to figure out, not only does this code need to be reviewed or could we just get it through, but also when you're reviewing it, what am I looking for? Because if you're just reviewing it to figure out, does this look cool because I want to understand it, that's different to, are there any major security flaws because I'm about to merge it to some critical system?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to allow me to talk a lot about code reviews, because it's one of my favorite topics. And I love the fact that AI is making it an even more important topic than before. So thank you very much, Daniel.
Pleasure. Thank you.
I've been Trisha G. Sorry, I'm just talking all over you. I've been Trisha G. Thanks for watching.